Hey tens, Ellipsis here. Today we're going to learn about how to add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers. Now, this is for a friend because he wanted this video uploaded on this date, so I'm doing this for him. Some terms to know. A numerator is a term that is above the fraction line. A numerator can have multiple terms, just like the denominator. The denominator are the terms below the fraction line. Once again, there can be multiple terms below the fraction line, like on the numerator. A mixed number is a whole number with a fraction part added to it. So an example would be 2 and 2/3. That would be a mixed number because 2 is a whole number and 2/3 is the fraction part. Like fractions are fractions with the same denominator. I'll show you what like fractions look like in the next slide. Unlike fractions are fractions with different denominators. Again, I'll show this in the next slide. A GCF is the greatest common factor. It's used to simplify fractions. The greatest common factor is exactly what it sounds like. It's the largest factor that is common between two or more numbers. And I'll go over this in the next slide as well. LCM, which is the least common multiple, is used to make unlike fractions into like fractions. The smallest multiple that is common between two or more numbers is your LCM. Again, it's exactly what it sounds like. And I'll go over what a multiple and a factor is in the next slide. Alright, let's take this fraction, 3/4. Now, this is a fraction because of this fraction line right here. So, what is the numerator and what is the denominator? Our numerator is this one right here because it's above the fraction line. And the one below the fraction line, this 4 here, is our denominator. So, what does a like fraction look like? A like fraction would have the same denominator, this 4. So, if we take the fraction line here, and then we need the 4 here. But the numerator can be different, so long as this denominator is this 4. Then they'll be like fractions. So let's take the numerator as 1. This and 3/4 are like fractions because they both have the same denominator, 4. And 3/4 can be symbolized as a circle with 4 parts, meaning the denominator signals to you that you have to divide some whole into 4 parts. The numerator, 3, tells you that you need to shade 3 parts of the whole that has been divided into 4 parts. So this is how fractions work. Alright, but what do mixed numbers look like? Well, a mixed number would be a fraction added to a whole number. So if we add, let's say, 2 to this fraction, 3/4, this would equal 2 and 3/4. This is your mixed number because there's this whole part, 2, and there's this fraction part, 3/4. Now, what do unlike fractions look like? An unlike fraction would be something like this, 5/8, which can be represented by a whole divided into 8 parts, and 5 of those have been shaded. And you can see that they're unlike fractions because this 8 and this 4, they have different denominators, so they're unlike. Now, what is GCF and what is LCM? First of all, let's define what is a factor and what is a multiple. A factor is any number that, when multiplied by another factor, gives you a number. So if we take the multiplication equation, 3 times 4 is equal to 12, this is true. And these two numbers, 3 and 4, are factors of 12. And what a multiple is suppose we have the number 3. Now, a multiple would be when you multiply this number by something, the result is your multiple. So let's say if we have 3 times 1, then 3 is a multiple of 3. Times 2, 6 is a multiple of 3. Times 3, 9 is a multiple of 3. So as you can see, 3, 6, and 9 are all multiples of 3 because when you multiply 3 by one of these numbers, you can get these. So that's what a factor and multiple is. So how do we find the greatest common factor and how do we find the least common multiple? Suppose we have these two numbers and we want to find the GCF, the greatest common factor. So we would lay them out and write all the factors of both of these numbers. So for 3 we have 1 and 3 because 3 is a prime number. And for 4, which is a composite number, we have 1, 2, and 4. As you can see, the only factor they have in common is this 1. So that's the greatest common factor. And you can't simplify this further. That's what it signifies to you. But let's say we have the numbers 6 and 8. Now, if we want to list all the factors for both of these numbers, we go with 1, 2, 3, and 6 for 6. And 1, 2, 4, and 8 for 8. As you can see, we not only have 1 as a common factor, we have 2 as a common factor. And so this is our greatest common factor. And what this does is, if you have the fraction 6 over 8, if you have the greatest common factor that is not 1, and here it's 2, then you need to divide each of these numbers by 2. And this will give you 3 over 4, which is the simplified version of 6 over 8. So if we want to find the least common multiple, and we can't find the greatest common multiple because multiples are infinite. You can multiply a number by any number to get a multiple, no matter how big that number is. So we can't have a greatest common multiple because that's not plausible. So let's say we wanted to add these two fractions together. Now they're unlike, so we need to get them to be like. We need to have the same denominator for both of them. So we need to find the least common multiple of 4 and 8. So what we do is we list the multiples of 4 and 8. So let's list some. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Okay, let's list these 5 multiples for now. And let's take this one. 8, 16, 24. And already you can see that we have the least common multiple as 8. So what we would do is multiply each side so that our denominator would be 8. And we already have the denominator as 8 here, so all we need to do is multiply this by 4. And to keep this fraction equal, we need to multiply it on the numerator too. And this would give us 6/8. So now this makes it a lot easier, but we'll discuss more of that in the next slide. So, how do we add and subtract like fractions? When we're doing this, we need to add or subtract the numerators based on what you're doing. And that's all you do. Then all you do is use the GCF to simplify if you need to. Let's try some examples. Let's take this first one. 8/11 plus 2/11. Now we can see that they're like fractions because they both have the same denominator, 11. So we don't need to worry about using the LCM here. All we need to do is add 8 and 2, like normal. So this would equal 10, and we keep the same denominator. So this is our answer, 10/11. Now let's take this one, 6/14 minus 4/14. Now we don't need to worry about the denominators. All we need to do is subtract 4 from 6. So what we get is 2/14. And notice that we can simplify this here. And so if we want to do the GCF, then let's do that. So 2 and 14. So factors of 2 are 1 and 2, because 2 is the only even prime number. And 14 is obviously not a prime number because it's divisible by 2. So 1, 2, 7, and 14 are our factors. And we can see that our greatest common factor is 2 here. So we can divide this whole fraction by 2, and not literally dividing it by 2, but I'm simplifying it by dividing the numerator by 2 and the denominator by 2. So what you would do is 2/14 divided by 2/2, and this equals 1, just so you know, is equal to 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1, and 14 divided by 2 is equal to 7. So 1/7 is our simplified answer. Now, how do we add and subtract unlike fractions? We need to use the LCM to convert the unlike fractions to like fractions, and then add and subtract the numerators and simplify the fraction if you need to. Alright, let's try some examples. Let's take this first one, 4/5 plus 2/9. Now, these are obviously unlike fractions because the denominators are different. And so what we need to do is find the LCM of these denominators. So let's list the multiples out. So the multiples of 5 go as 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Alright, let's stop at 45. And let's take 9. 18, 27, 36, 45. Now we have our least common multiple as 45 because they are present in both lists. So what we need to do is get our common denominator as 45. And how are we going to do that? Well, we multiply this denominator by the thing that makes it 45. And we can see here that 5 times 9 is equal to 45. And most of the time, you can just multiply the two denominators together and you'll be fine and you can do it. But sometimes there's a simpler one and it'll make your life much easier when you have to simplify. So how we do this is we take our fraction 4/5, our first fraction, and we multiply the denominator 5 by 9. But to keep it equal, we need to multiply our numerator 4 by 9 as well. And as you can see, 9 over 9 is equal to 1, so this is equal. So 4 times 9 is equal to 36, and 5 times 9 is equal to 45. And let's do the same to 2/9. But here we're not multiplying by 9, because that would give us a denominator of 81, which you don't want. We need to multiply 9 by 5 to get 45. And what you do to the denominator, you need to do it to the numerator. So we need to multiply 2 by 5 as well. And again, 5 over 5 is equal to 1. So this is equal to 10 over 45. Now you can see that these are like fractions because they have the same denominator, 45. And so let's add them. 36 over 45. Remember, you have to keep track of which fraction is which, especially when in subtraction. So plus 10 over 45 is equal to 46 over 45. Now we'll go over improper fractions later, but this is the same as 1/45 plus 45 over 45. And 45 over 45 is equal to 1, so that's all it is. And when we add a whole number to a fraction, we get a mixed number. So this is the same as 1 plus 1/45 or 1 and 1/45. Alright, let's try the second one. 5/6 minus 6/8. Now this may seem smaller, but let's see. So we need to find the least common multiple of 6 and 8. So let's do that. 6 and 8. So let's list the multiples of 6. 6, 12, 18, 24. Okay. And 8. 8, 16, 24. Now we can see that 24 is our least common multiple, so this is the denominator we want for both of them to make them like fractions. So let's do the same thing we did here. 5/6, 6 times 4 is equal to 24, so we need to multiply 5 times 4 too, and that's equal to 20 out of 24. And let's do the same with 6/8. 8 times 3 is equal to 24, so we need to multiply 6 by 3 too. That's equal to 18 over 24. See? 6/8 actually turned out to be less than 5/6, contrary to what you might think. So now let's subtract 6/8 from 5/6 and keep track of which one is which. So 20 out of 24, forgive that, minus 18 over 24 is equal to 20 minus 18, 2 over 24. And we can simplify this because if we do the GCF, 2 and 24, so 1, 2, and for 24 we have 1, 2, and as you can see that 2, there's no more factors than just 1 and 2, so 2 is our greatest common factor, and so we need to divide the numerator and the denominator by 2. So this will give us 1/12, and that's our final answer. Now, how do we add and subtract mixed numbers? When we're adding mixed numbers, we need to first expand the expression, since mixed numbers are basically a whole number added to a fraction. And we'll elaborate on that in the next slide. And then we need to add whole number parts and then fraction parts. And depending on whether the fraction parts are like or unlike, we need to follow the steps for adding them. And then once we're done, we need to condense our expression and write it as a mixed number. For subtracting, we need to again expand the expression, and then this time we need to subtract the whole number parts and then subtract the fraction parts. We're doing this separately. And again, depending on whether the fraction parts are like or unlike, we need to follow the steps for that. And then we have a few more steps before we write it as a mixed number. It depends on whether our mixed numbers need regrouping or borrowing. And I'll elaborate more on the borrowing in the next slide. So if borrowing is involved, we need to reduce the condensed whole number by 1, and then we write it as a mixed number. So let's try some examples with like fraction parts and no borrowing. So 2 and 1/7 plus 5 and 3/7. Now these two are mixed numbers, obviously. And how we expand this expression is we just add our invisible plus signs between these two. So this is in reality 2 plus 1/7 plus 5 plus 3/7. And so we have our whole parts here and our fraction parts here, and these fractions are like fractions, as you can see. So all we do is we add the whole parts separately. So 2 plus 5 is equal to 7, and then we add our fraction parts separately. 1/7 plus 3/7 is equal to 4/7. Then we add 7 and 4/7. Again, you can write this as a mixed number, so we write this as 7 and 4/7, and there's no simplification needed, so we're done. Let's try the second one. 7 and 5/9 minus 4 and 2/9. Now this has no borrowing because you can subtract 2/9 from 5/9. So let's do this. 7 plus 5/9 minus 4 plus 2/9. Now, if you've noticed that I've put this in parentheses, it's just so you can see why we need to subtract the fraction parts instead of adding them. So this results in 7 plus 5/9, and we need to distribute this negative to 4 and 2/9. So this will become minus 4 minus 2/9. And you can see more of this in the enrichment video that I will post in the description below. So now we need to take these separately. 7 minus 4 is equal to 3, and these separately. 5/9 minus 2/9 is equal to 3/9. And we need to simplify this, and we can see that 3 does go into 9, so this becomes 1, and this becomes 3, so this is equal to 1/3. And now what we do is we add these two. Notice how I'm not subtracting them, because essentially what this is 7 minus 4 if you reorder it, plus 5/9 minus 2/9. So there's no subtracting involved. So we get 3 plus 1/3, which is equal to 3 and 1/3, which is our final answer. Now let's try with unlike fraction parts and borrowing. Sorry for the extreme, but there's not a lot of time. So 4 2/3 plus 5 6/11. Now these two are unlike, and we have borrowing, I guess. Well, we don't have borrowing here, but there, you can see it. So now we need to find the LCM of these two fractions. Before we start anything, let's do that. So let's list them, 3 and 11. 6, 12, 15, 33. Okay, fine, let's stop there. And I guess you're thinking that, yeah, all I can do is multiply 11 by 3 and I'll get my LCM. And you're right, yeah, I should have probably done that. So sometimes you don't need to use the LCM and it just wastes a lot more time. So let's not do that. We know that our LCM is 33. So all we need to do is we need to multiply our denominator and numerator by what gives us 33. And in this case, it's 11 here. So that's equal to 22 over 33. And for 6/11, we have to multiply it by 3 on both. So we get 18 over 33. And so we have this done. And now we need to add these two. 22 33rds plus 18 33rds is equal to 40 33rds. And again, this is an improper fraction, so we can rewrite this as 33 33rds plus 7 33rds. And this would be equal to 1 and 7 33rds. Okay, so we have this here. And so let's add 4 and 5 together. 4 plus 5 is equal to 9. And we have this, so 9 plus 1 and 7 33rds. So we can ignore this fraction part for now and just add 9 and 1, which is equal to 10, and then just add the 7 33rds, which is equal to 10 and 7 33rds. This is our final answer. Alright, let's try this next one. Subtraction with borrowing is definitely harder than adding with regrouping. So let's do this. 9 4/7 minus 3 7/8. So first let's do the fractions. Let's get them to be like fractions. So let's just multiply 7 and 8 to get our common denominator of 56 and do that. So 4/7, 7 times 8 is 56, 4 times 8 again, and so this is equal to 32 over 56, and 7/8, we need to multiply this by 7, multiply this by 7 is equal to 49 out of 56, and you can notice that 7/8 is definitely larger than 4/7, so we're going to have to do some borrowing. So let's subtract 3 from 9 now. 9 minus 3 is equal to 6, and now let's subtract 32 over 56 and 49 over 56. So remember, we need to subtract this from this, so we get 32 56 minus 49 56, and this is equal to negative 17 over 56. And let's not worry about simplifying that for now, if we need to simplify it. So now we need to add 6 and negative 17 over 56. And adding a negative means subtracting a positive. So we're essentially subtracting 7/56 from 6. And this gives us 5, and then whatever remains of that 56. We're essentially doing 6 times 56 over 56 minus 17 over 56. And this 6 will turn into a 5, as you can see, so all we need to do is subtract 17/56 from 56 over 56. And this is equal to 39 over 56. And so this is equal to 5 and 39/56. Now, do we need to simplify that? Let's see. Let's take the GCF of 39 and 56. 39 and 56. So let's lay out all the factors for both of these numbers. 1, 3, 13, and 39. Now 56, 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, 14, 28, and 56. Okay, I'm getting a little squished. Whoops. So our greatest common factor is 1. So we can't simplify this fraction any further. So 5 and 39/56 is our answer. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video or this helped you, click that like button. If this didn't help you, click that dislike button. I greatly appreciate feedback. If you want more updates on new videos, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. If you have any questions related to this topic, put those in the comments below. And the comment section is the equivalent of a class discussion, so you can answer any questions you have the answers to. If you have any suggestions on how I can improve my future videos, or even suggestions on what I should do next, put those in the comments below as well. If I like your suggestion, I'll be sure to include that in the next video and give you a shout out. See you in the next one.